Laughing Bird Caye is one of Fragments of Hope outplanting sites. It's a replenished site since 2006. So the work that Fragments of Hope does, which is basically replanting corals across Belize, Laughing Bird Caye is their #1 site. It's the first site they started with. A couple years back, the corals have been experiencing several different natural disasters like hurricanes and strong storms. And in 2001, there was a Category 4 hurricane that devastated the corals, and most of the corals around this caye were staghorn corals, so the acroporid species. And since then, since the hurricane, the coral cover went down to about 6%. And since Fragments of Hope has been working and have restored the corals to over 60% now.
When we choose genets to outplant, when we go and collect from what we call our mother coral from different locations, whether if it's closer to shore, whether it's closer to the reef or in between the reef, because there's a big exchange whereby we take stuff from near shore out to the reef and from the reef inshore, simply to see how these coral genets and species are working with the different climate, the temperature, when we move them around. It's hard to tell sometimes the different genet within that species, so we collaborate also with Miss Maya Trotz, the university, to send out. We do collect samples where we send out and try to differentiate the different genets within that species.
I'm currently the principal investigator of a large-scale coastlines and people project called Strong Coasts. It's about equitable solutions with nature and people, and we focus specifically on mangroves and coral reefs. The project was really inspired by the work of Fragments of Hope, a community-based organization in Placencia, Belize, that does work across the country and also does exchange visits and would like to do more with coral reef practitioners across the Caribbean and Central America. The Strong Coast Project partners 7 academic institutions with 3 non-governmental and community-based organizations. In Belize, the leads are Fragments of Hope and WWF. And we also have partners that are, as I said, universities across the US mainly. Our sites are Belize, the US Virgin Islands, and South Florida, in particular Miami. And what we really want to do is work with communities so that they are part of the research decision-making process around what we call nature-based solutions. So our coral reefs and our mangroves, how do they contribute to reducing wave energy, therefore protecting our coastal infrastructure? How do they increase tourism or contribute to tourism, contribute to fisheries, contribute to blue carbon? Are relevant to sort of cultural heritage. So all of these things we're trying to unpack so that we expand the way in which we think about decisions on, for example, if we are going to invest in restoration activities, where do those activities go so that communities benefit and not just sort of persons who live next to those areas who have high stakes in the game in terms of real estate. Laughing Bird Caye National Park was declared a national park in Belize back in the 90s. It is a World Heritage Site. The Placencia community, I think, is one that is very in tune with its natural environment. And it was a location where many of the persons from this peninsula used, either as a local destination or to take tourists there. Tourism is a huge income earner on this peninsula. And so there was active restoration going there. I like to say that the caye is like a convergence site for research, because that has really been my experience working with Fragments of Hope out there. They're pretty much known around the world as the best restoration site to date.
Okay, so I'm Dr. Elon Cadogan from Barbados, and I'm working with Fragments of Hope just to, first of all, learn about what they're doing. There are some methods that they have been using that have been very, very successful. For example, one of the places we're going today is Laughing Bird Caye, and we visited there for the past 2 weeks, and what we saw is a thriving ecosystem. We actually have some sharks there as well, so it shows that the ecosystem is bouncing back. And we're thinking that it's due to the coral being there and being able to support the baby fish, the juvenile fish. You have that big, food web available for sharks to be there in the first place. So I think that by being here with Lisa and Fragments of Hope and learning about the coral fragmentation and the outplanting that they're doing, Hopefully we can take this back to Barbados and also do the same thing in Barbados and hopefully get some good results that they have achieved here in Belize. So when I was in Belize, working on Fragments of Hope, we basically went and we did monitoring, and we did some coral reef restoration, as I said, cleaning the coral, and we also did some coral identification, which is pretty important. We also were able to see the variations in the coral and what basically the corals are changing. And there was a very interesting brain coral that had two different species surviving on the same coral. So basically just to observe and monitor and see what things can be brought back to Barbados, seeing that they have so many different keys and so many different places, thousands and thousands of different corals, they're surviving and thriving, to see how it's best to bring that back to Barbados, understanding though that we obviously have different marine environments, and it was just good to have those those skills available, to then transfer to Barbadians here who are part of the CORALL initiative, working at Folsom Marine Park, Port St. Charles, and Vauxhall as well.
So we actually have collaborated over the years because they have protocols for coral reef restoration and so forth, and they've actually sent them to us, and in terms of helping of how do you do things, how do you successfully do things. So that's there's a connection, there's a working connection there. I should emphasize though, Belize has a giant reef. It's a second in size to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and Belize has a lot less dense population than Barbados. Barbados, where we're working in a different context here. So we're working in a very small, vulnerable island, and the amount of tourism and just activities that are going on in the whole island, let alone the coast, is different, so although you can take the techniques from Belize, from Fragments of Hope, and not only in physical restoration, but involving the community, because they have really strong community involvement in Belize, you can't translate it directly into Barbados, because Barbados is a different context. Since 2016, when we started, we've had 3 coral nurseries where we grew corals up from tiny fragments, and one of them was at Pier 1 at Port St. Charles. One was at a place called Driftwood, which is close to Mullins, and one was in Vauxhall Reef, at Vauxhall Reef, which is actually within the Folkestone Marine Reserve, close to Sandy Lane. The physical restoration part is when you take the coral fragments and you grow them up and you plant them out, and then you try to recreate a healthy reef. And so, we had been focusing a lot on that in the first few years, but what is taking increasingly more time and volunteer work is doing outreach and letting people know, letting everybody know now, is that the state of the reefs, and that we all have our part to help in keeping them healthy. So that's what we're focusing on a lot now.